Bastard, James Dean's cursed car. We talked about the cursed chest and the Busby chair, uh, and some artworks that were haunted. And go and check those out because those things are freaky. The Crying Boys and such. Really quick before we dive into the next section here, I just wanted to speak really quickly on the difference between cursed objects and haunted objects. After our show 2 weeks ago, I received a few messages asking why we hadn't covered the Annabelle doll, why we didn't cover a couple of other miscellaneous things. And frankly, it's because those are haunted objects. There's a really big difference between a haunted objects where maybe ghostly things happen around or maybe they move on their own, and cursed objects, which brings ill will upon the people who own them and their families. Now, there are some that are both. They seem to be haunted and they carry a curse with them. And we do touch on a couple of those here, but I just kind of wanted to put that up there. We may in the future do a show on haunted objects. I'm sure we absolutely will. It's on the
Oh,
agenda.
yeah. That'd be a great one.
Yeah. I don't know if it will even be within this year because frankly, our list of things that we will really want to do is about 3,000 miles long. So
It's hard to, I mean, we have so many things that we're excited about. It's really hard to decide what to do when.
it
All
really
right.
is.
So
Yeah,
are we
so
ready to get started? Or do you have more,
I
Jeff?
am.
Okay.
Nope.
How about you, Mark? Are you ready?
I was born ready.
Well, what we will do, we're going to pick up where we left off last time and start out with tombstone curses. And this is going to include like funerary statue curses as well. One of the first ones that I wanted to bring up, and let me get the screen up over here so we can share it, is, I'm going to make you guys wait.
Ooh,
Can you feel the anticipation?
the intrigue. The intrigue. Yay.
Yay. This is called the Black Aggie. And this particular statue, it's in Druid Ridge Cemetery in Pikesville, Maryland. And the original sculptor was Edward Pausch. I'm probably saying his name wrong, but Pausch.
If we didn't butcher somebody's name, we weren't on.
It wouldn't be us, would it?
Yeah.
This was created for General Felix Agnes in 1925. And it's not currently located in the cemetery anymore due to reasons that we'll talk about. Now it's actually at the Howard T. Markey National Courts building in Washington, D.C. So what is there in Druid Ridge now at this time? It's just an empty chair-like pedestal. So if you can see where the statue sits, all that's left is this pedestal right here. It has the name Agnes engraved into its base, and it had to be removed. The statue itself had to be removed because of trespassers. So let's talk a little bit about the statue itself, though. The Black Aggie, she's 6 feet tall, and it's a shrouded figure, and she's cast in bronze, and she sits on a stone. You can see like right here. That's what this is supposed to be. She has her eyes closed and her hands like resting beneath her chin right there. It's kind of hard to see. It almost looks like a flap in her shroud. And as you can tell by the picture, she's creepy. So, but so are the legends that have come up around this one. According to that, her eyes glow red at night. And if you look into them, you'll go blind. These were some of the reasons she ended up not being in the cemetery anymore, because kids were starting to come in and dare each other to go up to her. And, they were starting to vandalize the cemetery and things. But they also said that if a pregnant woman walks through her shadow, that she would miscarry. And they said at night that spirits of the cemetery would gather around her. And if you sat in her lap, you would die. And if you stayed overnight with her, you would die. So you can just imagine how much fun the kids were having with this one. The interesting part about the Black Aggie is she's actually a ripoff of a genuine work of funerary art, which is the Adams Memorial. And the Adams Memorial was made to memorialize a woman who had actually committed suicide. Her husband was Henry Adams, and he was of the Adams family, from which two of the US presidents came from. And so Henry had come home one day. It was December of 1885. And he found his wife. They'd been married for more than 10 years at this point, and her name was Marion Clover Adams, and she was dead. And Marion had been a photographer, and she had her own darkroom, and she had actually drank potassium cyanide, which is a chemical she normally used to develop her photography. And nobody knows why she killed herself. Apparently, no suicide note was found, and if there was one, someone destroyed it. So, husband did find her. So there's always been that question there if he had something to do with her death or not. So Adams actually hired sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens to create a statue in memory of his wife. He wanted it placed at her grave. Now, the original statue is located at Rock Creek Cemetery in Washington, D.C. And that particular sculpture was not given a name, but when people saw it, they called it grief, and proclaimed it to be one of the most profound expressions of mourning and loss that they had ever seen. And it was immediately became this famous tourist attraction. And then the artist actually died in 1907, and it was right before his death that the illegal copy was made. The copycat was the famous sculptor, which is really strange because he was famous in his own right. But he made this copy, and this was the Edward Pausch. He created the replica for General Felix Agnes. Now, let's see. Agnes had the statue placed on his family plot in Druid Ridge Cemetery in Maryland, and it was about 35 miles away from the original Adams Memorial. And when the widow of the true sculptor found out about this, she was completely outraged. It was this unauthorized copy of her husband's statue, and she threatened to sue them. But Agnes, he absolutely refused to have the statue removed. Now, Agnes died in 1925, and he was buried in the family plot as well under this sculpture. But what was really strange, instead of becoming an admired work of art, which is what he wanted, it became like what they called a dark shadow of the Adams Memorial. And at that point, it was nicknamed the Black Aggie. So there's an author, J.W. Oker. He wrote the book Cursed Objects. And he always said in his book, it's the Jekyll to its Hyde. So at that point, the Black Aggie, she becomes one of Maryland's most well-known cursed objects. And things start going bad when the trespassers start coming in. So in 1967, the Black Aggie was removed from the cemetery, and the Agnes family donated it to the Smithsonian, but where things go to die, basically. But the Smithsonian didn't want to put a knockoff on display, so they banished the Black Aggie to the basement, and she stayed there forever, forever being like at least 3 years. And in 1970, the Smithsonian receives this an authorized casting of the original Adams Memorial. And so they gave the original casting, a place of honor in the museum, and it's still on display there today. So in 1987, General Services Administration, the GSA, they asked for the statue because they thought she'd look great in their garden, just this big old garden, oh my guess. Not to mention she was free, So
free
they
is
asked
good.
for her. Free is always good. They asked for her, and the Smithsonian said, absolutely, take her away. And the Black Aggie was placed in the courtyard of the Howard T. Markey National Courts building. And she's actually now on Lafayette Square. She's 1717 Madison Place, Northwest. So if you want to see her for yourself, you can actually walk right up to it during business hours. An interesting note that Oker added was that about 500 feet from where the Black Aggie currently sits is the former site of the house where Clover Adams actually killed herself. Now, she was the one, if you remember the story from the beginning, she is the wife of Mr. Adams that drank the potassium cyanide, and she's the one that the original grief statue was commissioned for. Which is really strange that there's this little connection that runs back to the Black Aggie. And that house was raised to make way for the Hay Adams Hotel, which is still there today. And what's interesting about the Hay Adams Hotel is they think that she's supposedly haunted by the specter of Clovis Adams herself, which I thought it was kind of a full circle thing right there. It's pretty interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah,
Creepy though.
it
Do you
is
imagine?
creepy.
I hope they covered that statue while it was in the basement of the Smithsonian. Could you imagine walking past that thing in the darkness of a basement
No, look at
Yeah,
this
and it
face on it. How
literally
creepy is
is
that?
6 feet tall? Could you imagine, like, just
Come
it
around the
being there
corner and
with
there it is.
the poor
Ooh,
security guards and the
oh, I
janitors?
know. I know. I'd
Blech.
feel for them. I couldn't
oh
imagine.
yeah.
But yeah,
Let's
that
see
is
that.
the Black Aggie. I thought she was pretty interesting, though.
No,
So,
She
very
is
Mark,
interesting.
cool.
you're up. You want to talk about yours?
Yes, I have a very interesting one that everybody knows. Now, it's a curse on, I mean, it covers cursed objects and funerary stuff, but there's so many objects that came from this place, and you wonder if the curse is just spread all over now. So, we're, of course, talking about the tomb of King Tut. Now, it starts around 1917 when Howard Carter digs in the Valley of the Kings looking for a tomb and doesn't find one. And he was told in 1922 that he was going to lose his funding. He needed to get it done. And so he gets the funding from Lord Carnarvon, and he does luck out in 1922. The water boy finds a soft spot in the sands, and lo and behold, they dig up the steps. So later in the year, they make the famous breach into the tomb, and then they open it open it up. Lord Carnarvon and his daughter Evelyn, and they explore the antechamber and everything. And we all know that how this ended up. It's the most famous tomb ever found. It was loaded with gold, loaded with objects. Uh, and so Lord Carnarvon strikes a deal with the Times newspaper for a 5,000 pound contract to cover the story and all that. Then in 2023, they open the main chamber. After that, uh, things start to get a little weird. Um, you know, Egyptian nationalists demand that the treasures of the tomb be sold to pay off Egypt's national debt. And, there's the usual political things because there's a lot of money. If you just go sell all the gold and stuff, it's expensive stuff. Uh, then in April, Lord Carnarvon dies in Cairo of septicemia after nicking a mosquito bite with his razor. Howard is devastated, losing his friend and sponsor, and the rights of the contents are passed down to uh, Carnarvon's widow. Well, people just start dropping who are related to this. I'm going to start listing just because if we go down all the stuff, it gets tedious. But total, I believe, of 7 people, 7 or 8 people die who are related to this. And so, of course, the big thing in the news is it's a curse. That's the curse of the Egyptian kings. And so everybody's dying from this curse. Uh, and this is, I mean, they've even made a movie about it. You can watch. I think it's King Tut's Curse is a movie you can go on and watch. I haven't bothered watching it. Um, here's where it gets interesting. There was a book by uh, what's this gentleman's name? It's called London's Curse: Murder, Black Magic, and Tutankhamun in the 1920s West End. Uh, Published by Mr. Bynon. Uh, Mr. Bynon, in his book, lays out the case that famous Satanists Aleister Crowley uh, was responsible for the murders of all these people in London. So, is it a curse? Is it a murder mystery? I don't know,
Mm.
but I think
Some
that
would
just makes
say that
I
some
think it
would
just
say
makes it
Aleister
spicier.
Crowley is a curse.
True.
I mean, yeah, and uh, Crowley was well known to several of these people. I mean, they were acquaintances. So, um, after analyzing Crowley's diaries, essays, and books, um, this guy really thinks that Aleister Crowley, w- for some, and he outlines it in his book, uh, decides to kill these people who are related to the King Tut tomb. So I don't know if that's true or not, but uh, 20 people, it was 20 people linked to the opening of the burial chamber, uh, died, and 6 of them in London. Yeah, uh, Aleister Crowley was into everything. He had his fingers in everything. He was a very rich man, and he was it was kind of the thing back in the day to be the all Satan worshiping.
He was a
He did a lot of
nutter.
freaky things trying to
Yeah, I
to
mean the Hellfire Club and
yeah,
Mhm.
all that whole mess. And you know, did he murder some, or did he place a curse?
it's a good question.
That's what I want to know, because he's involved in all this Satanistic stuff. He could very well have actually cast a curse. So that is a good one, Enzo. Did Crowley come up with that on his own, or did someone from Egypt ask him to do it? So whether he murdered them or cursed them, I mean, who's to know at this late date? But it's always been pretty fascinating. And of course, uh, Tutankhamun's grave goods were spectacular.
Hmm.
The artistic talent in some of these funerary masks and whatnot. I believe there was like
Hmm.
he was in the middle of like 7 caskets. They just kept getting smaller, like those
Yeah.
Kachina dolls.
Yeah.
So
Can I read this real quick, Mark?
go ahead.
On this picture that's up down in the corner, it's really hard to read, but it says, as my eyes grew accustomed to the light, details of the room within emerged slowly from the mist. Strange animals, statues, and gold, everywhere the glint of gold. For the moment, an eternity it must have seemed for the others standing by, I was struck dumb with amazement. And when Lord Carn is it Carnarvon?
Canard.
Carnarvon.
Thank you. Unable to stand the suspense any longer, inquired anxiously, "Can you see anything?" It was all I could do to get out the words, "Yes, wonderful things." And that was spoken by Howard Carter.
Yeah.
Now,
I just
I'm
can
going
almost
to
imagine.
add on to this. They have found um, organisms, disease organisms, in some of these tombs,
Mhm.
including regular burials where they had mummification, um, that would have been untreatable in the 20s and 30s, and some of which are barely treatable now. Uh, so it's really no wonder anybody exploring these tombs would come down with some mysterious illness and die. So
Mhm.
perhaps those mysterious organisms, these bacteria and whatnot, are the actual curse.
Maybe so.
It very well could be.
So, but this is one of those times where we can point to uh, people actually dying, and it was attributed to this curse, and nobody knows if it was really cursed or not. Like I said, the armchair detectives are all over this one.
I
That's
will say this, I have seen some of the pieces that they pulled from the tomb. I got a chance to go and see, like, a traveling showing of these objects, and they are even more amazing than what you've seen on TV. The
Oh, sure.
detail and the gold and just you can feel the antiquity about them.
Oh yeah.
Like, sometimes when you go into a museum and you're like, "Okay, it's old stuff," but you really just don't get the history from it, you're just like, "Yeah, it's a vase." These, you can really kinda feel how old they are, like, the history that's attached to them. It's really interesting. If you ever get the chance to go and see any of the objects from the tomb, do it because it's
Well,
amazing.
it amazes me the skill in execution. Some of these articles uh, took.
Mhm.
You would be hard pressed to find artists today working in modern materials to do some of the things that they did. Now, some of them are kind of cheesy, but the gold work in particular was
It's incredible.
absolutely stunning.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Incredible stuff.
Hell, the curse may be greed. I don't know.
I think that's a part of it.
Probably a big part of it, actually.
Oh,
I
probably
think
so.
sometimes I think sometimes karma just, comes in and cleans
Knocks on
up a
the
little
door.
bit.
Pardon
Yeah.
me.
Anywho, yeah, we should move on. We should move on if we're gonna get through all these.
Yep.
All right. So this next one is a pretty interesting one. Is everybody familiar with Shakespeare?
Yes,
Who?
yes, I am.
Right? Who? Who's
I
that?
had beer with him the other day.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, so William Shakespeare, he was born April 26th, 1564, and he died the 23rd of April, 1616. He is widely regarded as the greatest writer in English language and the most famous playwright of all time. But however, while the bard is known for the life that he led, the circumstances of his death and the tomb where his body lies, which is what this picture is right here, um, it still to this day is shrouded in mystery. And he was always a bit of a drama llama. Shakespeare was. Um, he was buried at the Church of the Holy Trinity in Stratford upon Avon, and it is believed that he himself wrote the cursed epitaph. It's kind of hard to read because it's written in Old English, but we'll go over it here in a second of what it actually says. Um, is that the guy they named the milkshake after? I don't know. That's funny. Not sure, Enzo. It is unclear why Shakespeare died. We do know that much. It's There's some that believe that he died on his birthday. Historians actually think that he did die on April 23rd instead. He would have been 52 years old. And he died within a month of signing his will. Which is what's strange about that is in his will, he describes himself as being in perfect health. And there's actually not been any source documents found that state what his true cause of death was. The vicar of Stratford, he provided the only clue, and that was because he wrote in his notebook that Shakespeare, Drayton, and Ben Jonson had a merry meeting, and it seems drank too hard, for Shakespeare died of a fever there contracted, and then he was buried 2 days after his death. But the curse that is on Shakespeare's grave reads as this: "Good friend, for Jesus' sake, forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones.
Ooh.
And yeah, it's nice and rhymey.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it makes sense that he would have been concerned at the time because in Shakespeare's time, when he died, it was very common for bodies to be exhumed for research purposes, and or just to make room for more burials. Until recently, it seemed that that warning had worked, and even builders that were making repairs in the area in 2008, they didn't move the stones out of respect of the inscription, and also maybe to not bring the curse down upon themselves, just in case, you know.
I mean,
But
whether it's real or not, why take a chance?
exactly right.
Yeah.
Now, there are other weird things about his grave. There is no name on his grave, but the family members are buried next to him. Um, Even though they're there, his is the only one without a name, which is really kind of strange. But before the year 1623, someone did put a monument, has his likeness of him on it. Um, and it's on the wall near his grave just to commemorate him. But another thing, if you look at the picture here, his grave is super short. So it's only like 3 feet, actually a little less than 3 feet in length, which is actually shorter than his wife Anne Hathaway's grave that's buried next to him. And also, he was not buried in a coffin. So instead, the family members were all buried in winding sheets or something similar to that. But what's really interesting, for 400 years after his death, Shakespeare's grave sat undisturbed. The church had never allowed an excavation of the grave, despite numerous appeals from researchers, because they wanted to honor the bard's wishes. But in 2016, it was like the 400th anniversary of his death. A scan of the grave was done. That allowed them to, see what was in there without actually physically interfering with the grave. But the findings were crazy because the grave appeared to have been tampered with and Shakespeare's skull is missing. So
Oh
who
no.
knows? Yeah, who knows when that happened?
Oh.
So this set researchers on a quest to see if they could determine when this could have happened. And they found this rather elaborate tale. It was published in 1879 in an edition of Argosy magazine. And the story in the magazine goes that in 1794, there's a man named Frank Chambers, along with a group of grave robbers, and that they had stolen Shakespeare's skull for a collector for the price of 300 guineas. And in 1794, that would have been the equivalent of roughly, in today's date, it would have been roughly $1,000. So that seems like a lot of work for just $1,000. But the story had originally been dismissed as nonsense because they were just so certain that no one had messed with his grave. But when they compared the details of the condition of Shakespeare's grave, now knowing that his skull is actually missing, researchers now think that it was possible that an accurate or at least a semi-truthful account of what occurred is what was written in the 1700s. So then there's a follow-up story that suggested that Chambers had panicked and hidden the skull in St. Leonard's Church in Beloit. So excited researchers decided to examine this so-called Beloit skull. But once they did that, they really determined that it was most likely belonging to a 70-year-old woman. So Shakespeare's skull has never been found. So do we have any proof that the grave robbers actually met with the curse with no, we don't. But I, for one, I'm curious to see if it ever turns up. I'd love to find out if the skull does turn up, or if do you think we'll ever know what really happened to it?
Probably
I
not.
doubt it.
Probably
Somebody
not.
could have panicked and disposed of it.
Yeah,
That's probably what happened.
I think you're
Or
right.
it got put away in a private collection and either forgot about or lost its tag over time, and the kids of whoever stole it
Why the
originally
hell's there's a
don't
skull here?
know.
Hmm.
It would be
Probably.
cool if it was being used by a Shakespearean company as Yorick's skull
Oh, that'd be
Ooh,
wild,
the
wouldn't
last
that would
4 years.
be badass.
Which I mean,
it?
that highlights if you read that passage exactly. Alas, uh, cemeteries were small, and they would bury
Mhm.
somebody, and then when enough time had gone by for all of the uh, soft tissue to have been taken care of, they would exhume the bones, and they would go usually to like a catacombs or something, where often the
Yes.
bones and skulls are neatly stacked to make room in the cemetery.
Mhm.
Basically, they were recycling the plot,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the remains were usually respectfully stored in a catacomb anonymously.
Mhm.
So,
It's a pretty interesting story. I had not heard that his skull was actually missing until I started to do some research for this, and thought that was pretty wild. I don't know.
That's crazy.
yeah, I
It
had no
is
idea.
crazy. Okay, moving on. The next thing is on, we're going to move to Greek curses and fines. So we're going to go back a little bit further in time to the Greeks, um, and talk about the curses that they had. Not only did they have curses, they would actually fine you when it came to graves too. Um, the Greeks were, as well as many other ancient civilizations, they felt that to desecrate someone's tomb was to defile their memory, and if the tomb was vandalized, the soul's welfare in the afterlife could be jeopardized. So we see a lot of that, and we see that, in Egypt too, in the case of King Tut and things like that. Um, we know it was quite a common practice in other ancient civilizations, though. The tomb or the grave, it's considered the eternal home of the physical remains of the deceased, where his or her soul could return at will. It's also where all their house household items and keepsakes and things that they may need in the afterlife were kept. Um, So when it came to especially the upper class and nobility, it would, like with King Tut, it was a literal treasure trove, and it was always at risk of being robbed. And because of that, um, that's why a lot of these curses were put on, and that's why a lot of the governments decided to enforce fines too. But you also have people that couldn't afford to bury their dead loved ones, or they didn't want to spend the money to, and they may take their deceased and sneak them into someone else's grave, or somebody that couldn't afford a tombstone, they might just steal one that's already used and scrape off the other person's name and then use it for their personal benefit. But to prevent these from happening, those curses that would warn of these dire consequences for anybody that disturbed the tomb, and then on top of that, you would have the fines imposed by authorities. They were often included into the epitaphs themselves. So these curses were not limited to grave sites, and they could be placed anywhere with a document known as a curse tablet. And that's what this picture is right here. This particular one is a curse tablet from Uli, Uley. Um, And they most often took the form of stipulations such as, if someone should move my gravestone or boundary stone or whatever it was, may they be cursed in such and such a manner. And I call upon these specific gods, whichever specific gods they wanted to mention, you know, depending on the situation, to bear witness and take my side. And people felt that they could really depend on these curses as deterrents. But just to be safe, criminal prosecution was also made clear that if you rob this grave, we're going to sue you too. Um, and those fines weren't cheap, especially like in ancient Athens. Um, the cost of an adult male's food for a year was on estimate 36 drachma, and the daily wage for an unskilled laborer at the end of the fourth century was 1.5 drachma. So the power to fine to the tune of 10 to 50 drachmas, it was consequential. Even a relatively minor court case could carry a penalty of up to 1,000 drachma. That's like 27 years of food for an adult male. That's a good deterrent to not do this. So, um, so even, with the substantial fines or the wrath of the gods, that didn't always deter grave robbers, because in any ancient civilization, and just for the simple reason that rewards often outweighed the risks, there could be a fortune found in those graves sometimes. So you just had to not get caught, basically. I don't
Yeah,
know.
nobody caught on to the fact if they didn't put expensive stuff in the graves, they would be left alone.
Yes. Well, they were more concerned about having all these things that they needed to take them into the afterlife, because that was such a belief and an everyday thought back then. So
Yeah,
I
it,
could
it
see
was
that.
very common. Yeah.
Very common, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the info on Greek curses and fines. So next up, we've got Jess. So
Yeah,
tell us about
so,
yours, Jess.
we're not gonna show a picture on this, there isn't really a whole lot to show, but this story is so interesting to me because it not only combines, like, a cursed object, but also, like, a curse put on a family and old vampiric lore all at the same time. It kinda just smushes it all together, and it's a real quick one, but I really wanna tell this one because not a lot of people have heard it, and I just think it's a really, well, not cool, I shouldn't say cool, people died in it, but interesting, nonetheless. So,
Interesting.
this one comes out of Dummerston, Vermont. This happened back in 1778, and it is recorded in town history, so, whether there's truth behind what happened, that remains to be seen. So, this one is called The Cursed Dummerston Vine, and it happened in the Dummerston Cemetery, and you can actually go and see where this occurred at. So, the legend. The family of Captain Leonard Spaulding, who all seemed perfectly healthy and fine, were suddenly being struck down one by a sudden deathly illness. It was soon discovered that a vine or a root of some kind was growing from coffin to coffin in the Spaulding family plot. Every time the vine entered a new grave, the next member of the family would die. The solution was to somehow stop the vine from growing. So they took up the last body that had been buried in the family, burned the vital organs, and ripped the vine from the soil. And then the next Spalding in line, who was a daughter who had been very ill and was on the verge of death, suddenly got better and went on to lead a long, healthy life, right? That's the
Interesting.
legend, right? And there is a Spalding family cemetery, or a plot in the cemetery there. They did die in the way that they did. Of course, now that we know, now we know it was tuberculosis or consumption that took the family. However, back then, a lot of people thought it was vampires or something to do with something vampiric, right? And they would often yank the bodies out of the graves when they thought that this was happening to try to prove. So this is where that kind of gets twisted in at. So in the cemetery, uh, Captain Leonard Spaulding is buried there, although he wasn't a captain when he died. He was a lieutenant. That's the only thing that's wrong on that timeline. Um, and he's buried there with 11 of his children. However, the first 6 have been taken up at some point. So we know that's where the line happened at. Um, and it stopped on the 6th one. Now, this is where the legend goes a little awry. The 6th one, uh, or excuse me, the 5th one was John, and then the 6th one was Josiah. So there was no girl right there towards the end. So that's the only problem with the little story. But they are buried there, and the Dummerston Vine is very deep within that community. They certainly believe that's what was happening. There was a vine that was growing through the graves. Um, but I don't think that's what was taking the family down. I think tuberculosis had been passing through the community.
More than likely, yeah.
Yeah. Um, but really, really interesting. They thought that some kind of curse had been put on that vine, and the vine, every time it grew through another coffin, was causing them to become vampiric or some kind of a witch curse situation going on, and they were rising up and attacking the next member of the family.
Oh my.
And it was literally just taking them down one by one.
Yeah.
So interesting, right? But if you want to go see it, the Spalding plot is still there, and you can go and see it. It's at the Dummerston Center Cemetery, 914 East West Road, East Dummerston, Vermont. So if you're ever in the Vermont area, go check out the Spaldings. And well, the vine's not there anymore, but you can imagine. You can actually get online and see pictures of it if you want. You can go see the whole line that the vine traveled.
That's
Kind of
interesting.
cool. Yeah.
Cool.
One of these days we'll have to do a whole show on like those old, like the vampire and digging up graves and the zombie
Yeah.
stuff.
That would be
Oh,
cool.
And
Yeah.
burning and then eating the ashes to cure vampires.
oh yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty
So
gross.
interesting. All right. So up next we're gonna do the chained oak. Is that correct? Is that what we're on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. The chained oak. This one's
I
fun
actually found a
too.
picture of it.
Yay!
Woohoo.
So the chained oak, it's in Alton, Staffordshire, England, and you can still see it to this day. And as you can see it in Pam's pictures that she's posted here, there's not much of the tree left, but all of the limbs are still kind of chained to the tree, and there's a
Yeah, you
reason.
can see chains right here draped around.
Yeah.
And there's one there. There's one there.
So I'm going to tell the legend as it is told there because it is very deep in the history of this area. So, the legend. On an autumn night, the Earl of Shrewsbury was returning home to Alton Towers when an old beggar woman appeared in the road ahead and stopped his horse and coach. The woman begged the Earl for money. He cruelly dismissed her, so she cursed him. The old woman told the Earl that for every branch that fell from the nearby oak tree, one member of the Earl's family would die. The Earl balked at the woman and went on his way. That same night, a violent storm ripped through the area that caused a branch to break from the tree. The same night, the Earl's nephew mysteriously died in his sleep. Believing it was the curse, the Earl ordered his servants to chain up the tree so that no other branches could ever fall. Dun, 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 dun. There's the legend, right? And as you can see, this tree really does exist. Now, interestingly enough, so I found 3 versions of this story. Now, we know that the tree was chained. We can see that. But there's 3 versions of the story, and I'm going to tell you each one of them. So, originally, they say that the curse involved a man cursing the Earl and not a woman. Little change to the story. The second version was that there wasn't a storm that night, but the next day the boy was out riding and the branch fell on him. So they chained it up. And the third story, which is hilarious, um, at the end, the Earl retrieves the branch that the boy died under and does experiments on it to try to break the curse. Now, the last one there is completely fabricated. Apparently, now there is a nearby tourist attraction based on the tree, and they made up more of the story to make it more exciting for tourists that come in for it. Regardless,
As
this
happens.
tree is there. Yeah. And I did a little research because I was just like, I wonder if this Earl guy even really existed. I tried to like kind of touch base a little bit and kind of check in on that. Um, and there was actually 2 different Earls of Shrewsbury that fell right about the right time. 1820s through 1840s, there was 2 of them. There was a Charles Talbot and a John Talbot. So, it could have been either one of those 2. Yeah. Kinda interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, so you can go and see the chained oak if you're ever in England, if you're just, flying over for the day to go get lunch or something. Stop in and
Well, of course.
and see
That sounds like a
it.
fun time.
Why would you fly
Yeah,
to England for food?
why not?
Of all things, I'm not sure I'd go
Implying
for the food.
Are you
Uh,
implying that our English neighbors do not have good food?
no, they do, but I mean, I'm not a fan.
Oh, okay.
And you've seen me. There's not much I don't eat.
Boo.
All right, so moving on. Let's move away from trees. Let's go to mummies. All right. Now, I don't know how I'm a history nerd, so the mummy of Otsiaka is very familiar to me. I don't know if you
Mhm.
two know it
Yes,
Yes.
very
I'm
much, but
quite
it's like
familiar
still
with
at
it.
home. Uh, I think it's one of the oldest mummies ever found.
Yes.
I don't think he
Yeah.
is the oldest anymore, but I think he's one
At the
of.
time, I think he was when he was found.
Yeah. Um, about 5,000 years old,
Mhm.
roundabouts, they're guessing, right?
Yes,
So
I remember correctly.
this dude you're looking at here has some interesting history. So they think that he lived between 3350 and 3105 BC. Uh, he was found on September 19th, 1991, by two German tourists in the Otzel Alps, on the Australian, excuse me, Austrian Italian border. And the body was actually so well preserved when these two gentlemen found it that they thought that it was actually a victim of the
Mhm.
cliff above. They thought that he had fallen off the cliff and had passed.
Yes.
Had no idea he was an antique, basically. Um, Anywho, it took a whole team to chisel him out of the permafrost and to get him salvaged correctly. And this is when the curse apparently began. And we have a long list, so I'm just going to kind of touch on all the things that supposedly happened around this here mummy. So, uh, the deaths. Rainier Hin died in 1992. He was the head of the forensics team. He was the first to touch the mummy by picking it up with his bare hands. He died in a car crash on his way to give a lecture on his findings.
Oh, wow.
Kurt Fritz died in 1992. He was the man who found and reported the body to Hin, the other guy that died. And he died in an avalanche. Excuse me while I flip a
Me,
page.
he's a mountain climber, right?
Yeah. He
Okay.
died in an avalanche just after Hin died, literally like just a couple days after he died in his car accident. Uh, Rainiel Hotzel died in 1992, a few months after Fritz, the man who filmed the Iceman's removal. He died suddenly after just releasing his documentary of the of them peeling him out of the permafrost. Uh, it was later found out that he had an unknown brain tumor.
Oh, wow.
Helmut Simon died in 2004. He was the second man who found the body and was found frozen in the ice really near to where they located the Iceman.
Oh,
Oh,
Just
no
like
way.
yeah, like really close to it. They found him frozen to death. He
that's
had fallen from the cliff above, just like they thought it had happened to him, during a freak blizzard, which was, I guess, really odd because he was a very experienced climber and should have known the pitfalls of doing what he was doing. So interesting.
Mhm.
Dieter Wanicki died in 2004. He was the man in charge of the mountain rescue team that was sent to retrieve Helmut Simon, who died. He died of a massive heart attack one after Simon's funeral.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Conrad Spindler, he died in 2005. He was one of the first archaeologists to examine the mummy. He actually publicly scoffed at the curse when the media brought it to light. after all the 2004 deaths. He stated, "The next thing you'll be saying is that I'll be next." And just after that, he died of
So to me, this is actually more compelling than the King Tut thing.
It is for sure. I'm like, should we
um,
take the picture down?
Yeah, I'm not. I don't even want to look at my computer.
So we have one more. So Dr. Tom Loy, he died in 2005. He was the one that ran the original DNA analysis and discovered different blood types on the clothes of the mummy. He came to the conclusion that the mummy had died after a battle. Just before the release of his book on the topic, he died suddenly of a blood condition. He died of a blood condition after working with
The
blood
blood.
on, yeah, on the mummy. Yeah. Um, it was later found out that he became aware of a clotting issue he had just had after the mummy was initially discovered. After he first examined the mummy, he suddenly had this. Craig and Ashley said, "You win, mummy."
Yeah.
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 Um,
Didn't they
a
find
little
arrow
in.
wounds in this guy?
Oh yeah, they found all sorts of stuff. It was really interesting. He had a full belly too. Another interesting side
Mhm.
note. They knew exactly what he'd had for dinner. They found different blood on him. They realized that he most likely helped maybe pull some other people out of the battle, and he managed to slip away, and went off and died kind of on his own.
Wow.
Uh, yeah. A little interesting side note. So, and I've included this with our show notes as part of my research for this. I found an author. His name's Neil Gordon, and he did a book on the mummy and everything. Um, and I'm trying to remember how to say this correctly. So, uh, one of the things about the mummy is that he had a very large injury right underneath his armpit area in his rib cage. It might have been one of the death blows. They're not sure. It was pretty deep, some kind of a stab wound. Um, but as this author was doing the research for the mummy, he hadn't even gotten to the injuries parts yet, and he had this horrible ache underneath of his armpit, right in his rib cage area, that just afflicted him for days. And then he found out that this mummy had received this wound. And that's when he decided to finish up his book on it and decided he wasn't going to go any
Done.
further because he wondered if the curse wasn't following through with him because he'd seen where anyone who'd done any research at all at the mummy was not doing well.
That's
It's like,
wild.
I'm out. I'm noping right out.
Yep.
Yeah,
I don't blame you.
pretty much.
No, no, I don't blame him at all.
I wouldn't press my luck.
No. All right. So I say we move out of the cold, cold Alps, right?
Yes,
Let's
they
And
are
do
move to
cold.
that.
Kentucky. Are we going to move over to Kentucky now?
We are.
All right.
I have a picture of the book. How's that?
There we go. So yeah. So we first heard about this from this book called The Annals of Kentucky. And basically it kind of gives you a rundown on what Kentucky looked like before we even kind of took over that part of the land, who the Indian tribes were at the time, the local legends and lore. It is so interesting. If you can get a hold of a copy, read it.
It's a
Or better
fascinating,
yet,
fascinating book.
It's
yeah,
on Google.
go over to the What If Tomorrow media on YouTube and Facebook and go look up
Mhm.
some of our older shows. We did a run of shows with Mark and Phil about this topic. So interesting. Can't
We
even
went pretty
start.
deep on that.
We did.
Yeah. Super, super interesting. If you are interested in the white race of Indians, the cave dwellers, giants in America,
Yeah, the redheaded giants. Yeah.
Yes.
redheaded, yeah, go and watch those. I'm sure we're probably going to do it on this show eventually too, but man, we did a good deep dive on that. So go
We
check
did. It
that
was
out.
fun.
Um, but while we were researching all this, I found a cursed piece of land that's in Kentucky, and the story behind it is so interesting. So I'm going to touch on it here. Um, like I said, we're not going to do all of the animals of Kentucky because it's its own 5, 6, 7 show
Easily,
Yeah,
easily.
breaking that down
thing.
is gonna be big.
Yeah. So this one is actually called The Curse of Yellow Hair. And I'm going to tell the legend here and the curse that comes along with it. So this comes from the old Shawnee stories and histories. It started with a battle that eradicated a prehistoric race of white giants in the Ohio River Valley. The chief or leader of the white tribe of giants that inhabited that area at the time was called Yellow Hair. They were mound builders and had control of all the surrounding areas, hunting and fishing. A nearby tribe of Shawnee wanted the use of this area too. Their chief, Hawkwing, sent men to ask Yellowhair to share, or they would massacre the white tribe and take the land anyway. That was, pretty
Please
nice,
share or we'll kill you and everything you
It,
have.
basically. So Yellow Hair, the other tribe's chief, refused. The Shawnee attacked, and the white tribe were overrun and slaughtered. Yellow Hair cursed the Shawnee and the land before he died. And to this day, everyone who has owned that land and all the descendants of Hawkwing have died in odd and untimely ways. So the legend proved true. Two cemeteries or burial areas have actually been found on this spot of land, and both are really weird. One burial is full of common sized bodies, all Indian, buried with Indian type accoutrements, I guess you could say. The second one, however, is full of 50 plus bodies, all of giant skeletons. They're all 7 feet tall or taller. This has actually been found. This
Oh,
is not made up, right? Uh, all are men. All were buried facing east in an upright sitting position. So they're not laid out flat, they're actually sitting up cross legged. They were buried in the ground that way. Each one has a smashed skull on the left side. And one burial whose body was exceptionally tall had a more ornate weapon and objects and is believed to be Yellow Hair, the chief. He was buried at the front behind all of his supposed men, I would guess. Um, Now, the really interesting thing about this property, I checked the owners. There's no like proper owners right now. It's owned kind of by the state, I guess you could say, because the last owners all died. The last actual owner of the property was a grandmother and a grandson. The grandmother died in her 50s in a car accident, I believe. And then the grandson died just a month after her of a sudden heart attack, and he was in like his 30s. So,
Oh, wow.
every member of those families that have owned that property have just died out, and finally the state has just taken over the property.
that's
Yeah,
wild.
it's crazy. But like I said, if you get a chance to go over to the What If Tomorrow page and look down through all the old logs, you're going to find it under the fringe and look for the Annals of Kentucky, Giants in Kentucky, all of those. So interesting.
And you can go to Spreaker.com and listen to our entire catalog for
Yeah.
that. So
Yep.
it's on there.
Yeah. And while you're over there, listen to some of the other shows
Interesting.
because we talk about interesting stuff on over
Yeah.
there.
We got all kinds of wild stuff on there.
Yeah.
We get a little crazy sometimes.
All right, moving on. So we're going to move away from Kentucky, although I'm sure there's some of these in Kentucky, and we're going to move to da 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 Elmo.
No,
Oh,
I
I
mean,
just saw that Enzo had asked this. 7 feet with yellow hair. Yeah.
Yes, and as white as could be.
Mm-hmm.
Blonde eyes or blue eyes.
Blonde eyes.
Yes, blonde eyes.
Bleach.
All right, Elmo. So, I actually, when we were deciding what objects we were going to talk about, I actually giggled about this one because I was like, "Have you heard about that cursed Elmo?" This is way more than what I expected. Um, I'm going to talk about the main Elmo. I think everybody has probably kind of heard of before, but I found so much more than that. Apparently, Elmo in any form is one you do not want to own. Don't
I
buy
mean,
your kid an Elmo.
have you heard his
I will keep
voice
that in
on
mind.
Sesame Street? It's the kind of voice that follows you into your nightmares.
Yeah. He's kinda like Barney for me. I'm not a big Elmo fan.
Well, you
Um,
know, the guy who originally did the voice for Elmo, he actually got in, like, big trouble. I can't remember what he did, but it was something horrific, and, he was fired, and he may be in jail. I'm not sure. But, yeah, he's
ye
the Elmo you hear now is not the original. So maybe he cursed
goodness.
him. I don't know.
I don't know. Anywho, so we're gonna talk about the Elmo curse. I'm gonna start out with one that apparently had, like, a demonic voice. So, this happened in 2008 in Florida. A family gave their two-year-old son, James, electronic plush toy, and I went and looked it up. It was called an Elmo Knows Your Name, which is bad enough. Basically, you could hook it up to your computer and you could input your child's name into it. And then it would enter that name into its little system and it would just, it had little lines that it would say and include your child's name in it to personalize it. Um, so the toy was the boy's favorite, and he used it so much it soon ran out of batteries. So his mother took it from the kid, pulled the battery pack out, took the batteries out, put brand new batteries in it, closed it up, and gave it back to her son. And pretty soon she started realizing that her son was saying something very odd. Um, he kept running around saying, kill James,
Oh,
right?
nice.
Not something a 2-year-old would often say, right? So she snagged the toy from him because that's what he was carrying around and pushed the stomach. And it did. It said, kill James when you push the belly quite clearly. Um,
Yikes.
so concerned, his mother changed out the batteries again. And unfortunately, this actually made it worse. This made it so you didn't even have to push the belly. It would just repeatedly sit there and say, kill James, kill James, kill James, kill James.
Lovely.
Yeah. So
Ooh.
she actually removed the batteries completely and she hid the toy from her son, which was actually very upsetting for him because it was his favorite. Any of y'all at home with kids know that they get attached to that one thing. You
Mhm.
can't take it away or it's the end of the world. Um, they ended up having to keep giving it more power. Yeah, bad idea.
I've got the power.
Yeah. So they could never get it to fix. They ended up finally they took it to a local news crew because they couldn't even get the toy company to send a replacement or to give them any ideas of why this was doing it. Um, they never ever could get it fixed, and apparently it was sent back, and the company sent them a voucher for a brand new one. All good to go. However, I was smart enough and I got up and I found that news cruise piece that they did, and I recorded the voice, so we're gonna listen to it now.
Ooh.
It's a little weird. Hold on, let me get my volume turned up. If I can get it to play. What was that? The what was that was the news crew guy underneath of it. Did you guys hear it?
No. What did try to
Oh,
play
No?
it again. I heard
Okay.
something, but I couldn't tell what I heard the what was that.
What was that?
Kill
Did it come through?
James?
What did
Killed
it say?
James,
Oh my
Kill
gosh.
James?
Ugh. That is
right?
creepy.
Ugh, yeah.
And what did
So
James do to Elmo?
Yeah.
so I found another interesting one, that happened just 6 years ago, right? And this one I went and looked it up. It was a play all day Elmo, apparently. This Elmo began speaking on its own, um, with no batteries in it,
Nope.
right?
Nope.
Nope.
The only thing I can say to this, and I don't know if there's any volition to it or not, but, a lot of these things, like, if you go, like, at Halloween, you can go and try all the different little characters and stuff and make them say things without them actually having the batteries in them. Sometimes they'll have, like, a little button battery in there with a little trigger that can make it run, like, 1 or 2 of its things without having the batteries in it. It's like a little trial piece that they have in it.
Mhm.
Um, but I can't imagine that that little button thing would last very long and
It
sit there and let
shouldn't.
it run on its own like that. So
Yeah,
that's the
it should.
only thing that I could say. Um, so I found that one, and I also found this one, and this one freaked me the heck out. And this is where I'm gonna go a little bit off of our base here. I had that little discussion with everybody about the difference between haunted objects and cursed objects. I'm gonna tell you this story, and I think it really leans towards the haunted side, but it's so absolutely freaking weird that I decided to include it because the Elmo thing was freaking me out a little bit because it went from something funny to something a little nutty.
The fact that they
So
made more than one version frightens me.
there's there's so
There's
many different
tons of them.
versions.
There's
Yeah.
tons of Elmos. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one I found on another podcast. So this one came off of Real Ghost Stories Online. I found it on YouTube. It premiered February 17th, 2015. If you guys want to go see it on Real Ghost Stories Online, or you can listen to it. It's a listening podcast on YouTube. So this story. So it was being told by this woman when she was little. Her grandma bought her older sister an Elmo doll. Right away, the younger sister began having nightmares about the doll. And in her dreams, it would come to her and say it was going to kill her.
Ugh.
Scared, she got a hold of her sister's Elmo doll and she threw it in the back of her sister's closet. She then, that same day, had a dream that that her and her sister were watching a movie and the closet doors blew open and the Elmo flew at her screaming, "I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you."
Oh my
So
god.
the next yeah, she woke up, closet doors were closed, she was fine, but it was time to get up and go to school. She got dressed, got in the car, and they pulled out of their driveway and took a right onto the road, and she looked up at the tree line as they were driving past. She was in the back seat, and she saw that freaking Elmo doll setting up in the tree like a human would with its legs crossed and its arms on the branch holding itself up, and she said she watched its head follow her all the way down the road.
No, 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 no. Nope.
Yeah. She
Nope.
spent the whole day freaked out wondering, it's escaped. Is it gonna come and get me at the school? What's happening? And she said when she came back, the Elmo wasn't in the tree anymore. And she got home and got into the closet and it was still in there, but she didn't know if she was like, "How could I have made that up? Why would I make that up?"
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. So I found tons of stories about the famous Tickle Me Elmo and issues with it,
Yeah.
saying horrible, nasty things. Everybody knows those stories.
Yeah.
And I
They're
also
bad.
found I also found a story about a potty time with Elmo book.
Mhm.
Um, It's one of those press books where it has all the little different sayings, and as you read the book, it shows you which button to push to go along with
Mhm.
the story as you go, and one of the buttons you would push would say, "Who wants to die?"
Oh, nice.
This really happened. They had to recall them. You can still find this original book, but you have to pay about $600 on
Oh,
eBay for
geez.
it.
Oh my gosh. Enzo said, "Burn it and salt the ashes." That is a very good idea.
So I have the recording of that sample from that book if you wanna hear it.
Ooh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Books came with this sound instead. Elmo laughed.
You're about to die.
Yeah.
Holy
Let me play it again.
friggeroonies.
Yeah.
Books came with this sound instead. Elmo laughed.
Right? So, I only included this because there wasn't a curse with that, it was just I think probably somebody programmed it wrong on purpose, probably. They said it
Probably.
was an accident, but blah, blah, blah. Anywho, side note, so when I found out about this, I went looking for stories on it to see, how relevant it was, and I watched this, piece on YouTube. It's from April 5th, 2016, and it was posted by Mr. Muppet 93. That's his handle, so you wanna go watch it, you totally can. Mr. Muppet 93. Um, he ran a story on this, kind of like a ha-ha, and he bought one of those freaking books off of eBay because he wanted to see if it would really play it, and it did. He plays it on there, you can hear it. Um, the interesting thing though, so after he got done recording, he said he stayed up late and was editing, was almost done, but was tired, threw the book to the side, and went to bed for the night. But unfortunately, he never got to go to sleep that night because it wouldn't stop playing.
Ew.
And he said it just kept getting louder and louder, and it didn't matter where he put it in the house. That's all he could hear all night long. So when he posted it, he put that little tag on the end and he was exhausted looking. He was like, "I'm gonna throw this away now." He was like, "I feel like I'm cursed because I did this story on it." So
Ugh.
there's your Elmo curses. Fun,
And
That's
it
fun,
freaky how
looks
many
fun.
of
like
them
the
there are.
original voice
Yeah.
for Elmo
Did you find him?
did not go to jail because of the statute of limitations.
Hmm.
What did he do?
Um,
I couldn't
just
remember.
allegations of sexual impropriety with minors,
Oh, that was
Oh,
it.
which he
Yeah.
denied and was dismissed due to expiration of the statute of limitations.
I didn't know there was a statute on that.
Apparently, there is.
Hmm. Enzo said, "Put it in the microwave. You won't hear it for long, but you may need a new microwave."
all right. Well, here you go, Enzo. So this is where we're gonna veer we're gonna veer off of these a little bit, and I'm gonna tell a personal story because my story has kind of a lot to do with the Elmo story. And this is nutty. Anybody who listens to What If Tomorrow, you've probably heard this story at least. I think I've told it once before.
Yeah,
On a
I think
way
you did.
earlier one.
I've heard it,
Yeah.
but I think it was on there.
Yeah. So I'm gonna grab a drink. So I have my own cursed object story. And it's a fun one. It haunts my dreams still. So, back when I was in high school, I had the attentions of a guy I did not want the attentions of. Let's just say I had a little stalker action happening. That was fun. Um, Bless his heart, he kept trying his hardest. He was basically a pain in my butt, but he would show up to my home because he unfortunately knew where I lived, with various gifts, and letters and flowers, and boy, it was getting old. And his last attempt happened. He showed up at my door with potted lilies. They looked like they got stole right out of a church. It was right around Easter time, so I've always wondered. Um, and a stuffed white bunny that was also Easter related. Um,
He may
I
have
got
come
rid
from
of
the
him.
cemetery too.
Ugh. Unfortunately, I did not have any problem with the flowers. Just to let you know what happened to the flowers, I ended up getting an A off those flowers because he gave me 2 sets of them, and I used them for my science project, and I played one, like, rage metal, and I played the other one classical, and, like, did my which one reacted better, so I got an A, so
Cool.
some good did come out of it.
Of course,
However,
the
the
rage metal one turned out the best.
It bounced on its own.
yeah, basically. So, flowers all well and good. The bunny, however, the bunny has haunted my dreams. So, it was a pretty nondescript rabbit. Had it wasn't shaped like a actual rabbit. It was, cartoony looking. It had legs and arms. And when you squeezed its hand, it giggled, but not in a good way. It was the strangest cackling giggle I've ever heard. Um, it shouldn't be coming out of a bunny. It shouldn't be coming out of a doll for that matter, this sound. I detested it. It had a little carrot on its other hand that was kind of sewn in, was kind of floppy there, long ears, and I didn't want anything to do with it, and my mom thought it was hysterical. She thought it was hysterical that this kid just kept showing up with crap, and she kept pushing it at me, pushing the hand, making it chuckle, and I was like, "Get that thing out of here." And I chucked it, like, on a table or something like that. She kept grabbing up. I finally just yanked the batteries out of it because I was tired of hearing it. And at some point that day, she threw it into my bedroom onto my bed, which ticked me off even more because I did not want to see this thing. And I picked it up and I threw it underneath my bed so I wouldn't have to see it anymore. Now, at that time, I had a friend of mine who was actually living with us for a short while, and we had moved a secondary bed into my bedroom, which was about 4 feet away from my bed. And we went to bed that night and had fallen asleep, and in the middle of the night got woken up by the sound of that freaking chuckling.
Ew.
And in my sleepy stupor, I'm just like, "Son of a," and I climb out of bed and I'm half underneath my bed trying to get to it, and I finally find it and I yank it out, and my friend is going, "Shut that stupid thing off. Why is it going off?" And I was like, "I don't know." And that's when it dawned on me, wait a minute, didn't I take the batteries out? And this time I'm mad because I'm sure my mother has reloaded the batteries in it before she threw it on my bed. She had not. I had ripped the back open because it was a basic Velcro, his little back was Velcro, and you pulled it apart, popped the battery cover off, no batteries.
Ugh.
Freaky. My friend is trying to exit the bedroom as fast as she can, and I'm thinking it has a little trigger somewhere with the little battery in it. So I ganked the entire battery pack out of it and went hunting through the fluff. And I managed to get the arm pulled wrong side out to where the button was that you pushed in its hand, and I dislocated the wire out of it completely.
Dismembered it.
I dismembered it, and it kept going.
Ooh,
It
no.
giggled, and it giggled, and it didn't even have a pause in between it after a while. It was just constant. And I finally reached up and I found the speaker box in its head, and I yanked that out, and it was still going. So my mother is up by this time and is like, "What is going on?" She looks at it and she throws it because she's like, "No, I'm not touching this thing." And I ended up putting my shoes on. Now, to let everybody know, we lived out in the country, so this wasn't in the middle of a town or anything. I threw some shoes on in my PJs, grabbed that thing up and ran it to the far side of our property where the burn barrels were. And I set that sucker on fire. And I stood there and I watched it burn.
Burn it with
And
fire.
only then did it stop. I never could figure it out. We turned that thing wrong side out. All it was fluff inside of it. Now, interestingly to note, as scarring as all this was, about I think it was about 3 years ago, I was listening to Jim Harold's Campfire Stories, and he had a woman come on that talked about her going over to a friend's house for a sleepover, and this friend had this stuffed bunny with a carrot in one hand, and you pushed the other hand, and it made this horrible cackling sound that she hated, and she woke up in the middle of the night because she thought something had bit her.
Oh,
And when
God.
she woke up, she looked down and that bunny, because they were in their living room, in this girl's living room, not in her bedroom, this bunny had showed up downstairs and she thought it had bit her.
Holy
She had a
cow.
mark on her leg and she ended up like standing up and like throwing it at her friend because she thought her friend was playing a horrible joke on her and it started laughing repeatedly. And
Ew.
the way that this woman explained what it looked like and what it did, I'm pretty dang sure it was the same style bunny. So
That's freaky. I've heard that story before and it still freaks me out.
Little Satan foo foo
it
hopping through
I
Jess's
wish
bedroom.
I have
Mm,
hunted for that giggle, something akin to it to kind of like be able to show everybody what it was, but I can't find anything like it.
that's
It's just the
probably a
most
good thing.
unnerving, creepy crawly. Blech.
Ugh. So gross.
It's very gross.
It is.
Mhm.
Rick posted this in Facebook. It says, I had a couple of old books from photos. Wait, sorry, I can't read. I had a couple of old books of photos from the turn of the century, from the 20s and 40s. I swore that they were cursed because the whole time I owned them, they were giving off creepy vibes. And I put them in a storage tote and they kept showing up in random areas around the house for no reason. This went on for like a month or so. Finally got rid of them and everything went normal again. I'm glad you got rid of them. That was the smartest thing you could do. Ooh,
Yeah.
freaky stuff. And Enzo said, I am imagining a Joker style laugh.
It was just it wasn't a it
Ooh,
wasn't a natural laugh. It was a weird cackly chuckle thing. It just bleh. I can't ugh, I can't
goodness.
even it still grosses me out. But anywho,
That is
let's move
freaky.
let's move
Okay.
away from stuffed menaces.
Oops.
So,
I guess I don't have a picture of the next one. I guess we're going to stare at Elmo for a little bit longer. That's all right. Because he's not freaky at all.
no.
No, not at all.
Okay, so we're going to move into more natural things away from Elmo and from dolls. This one we're going to talk about is actually Pele in Hawaii. And if you don't know who Pele in Hawaii is, if you're old like I am, you may have seen something on the Brady Bunch way back in the day where they go to the island and one of them takes a rock and they end up having all these accidents and things. That's kind of what this is based on, or what that was based on. So Pele is Hawaii's matriarch. She's incredibly protective of her lands and her children. And legend has it that Pele considers the lava rocks and the sand as her children. So, therefore, if anybody steals the rocks or the sand, they should expect Pele to exact her vengeance on them. And her anger, like the fury of any woman scorned, is not child's play. We're not talking about breaking a fingernail or losing your favorite pair of socks here, for sure. Many people who've reported this curse, they tell stories of serious calamities, like from pets dying, which seems to be the most common thing, to actually losing loved ones, to relationships ending, lost luggage, missed flights. There are tons of stories on Pele and her curse that you can find actually on Reddit. There's a whole subreddit about them. But the largest curse of all is if you take lava rocks, the one thing that you need to realize is that's actually illegal in the state of Hawaii. Taking lava rocks is it's illegal because it's considered to be taking a protected natural resource of the state. The rocks are an important part of the Hawaiian culture. They have significant spiritual significance to the people who live there. And Pele's curse, it can last for like days, months, and sometimes even years after picking up these lava rocks. And it's believed the only way to get rid of this curse is to return the stolen item to the island. And there's tons of tourists who write letters to the National Park Service begging the rangers to return. They'll send the rocks back and they'll beg the rangers, please take these rocks back to where we got them on our behalf to get rid of this curse or whatever's happened to them. Most people do report that once they send those rocks back, that their streak of bad luck has seemed to end. And the National Park Service, on their website, they note that they receive anywhere about an average of 1,000 rocks a month
Oh,
turned
good
back to
Lord.
them. So
Somebody's
that's
got
about,
a job just taking rocks.
yes, that's about 12,000 rocks being returned a year. That is a lot of rocks. That is crazy. But
Don't let my daughter go there because she'll grab one.
right? Well, I love rocks too, but I'm not going to do that. Enzo said if every tourist took a rock, there wouldn't be an island left after a few years. That's very true.
It'd be like that. If anybody's ever read Restaurant at the End of the Universe or any of the Doug Adams books, one of the entries in the encyclopedia was where they cut off arms or stuff if you were too heavy when you left this planet because of erosion.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's funny.
Hmm.
Yeah, Enzo said they have some of the letters on display at the Volcano Parks Museum. Yeah, they do. There's, if you go to the National Parks website, you will see them there. And Hawaii tourism, if you just Google that and Pele, you can find all kinds of stories about this. It's a big deal. I remember being a kid and watching the Brady Bunch and thinking, oh, that's pretty wild and blah blah blah. Can't remember what all happens to him. I think like doesn't Bobby break his arm and stuff like that?
I don't
Can't remember
remember.
what all happens, but
I remember the episode vaguely.
yeah, it was a good one though. It stuck with me anyway. So that's what I had on Pele.
All right, well, let's move on to Uluru.
We can get rid of Elmo. Yay!
All right, so more rocks.
Woohoo!
So apparently, this isn't just a Hawaiian thing. They
Wait,
share it
before
with
we go
everyone.
on, you're right, Enzo.
Yeah.
Greg got hit in the head with a surfboard. That is absolutely right. I do remember that. Sorry,
Poor
Jess. Didn't mean to
Greg.
cut you off.
That's all right. So
Serves
the
him right for
Ulula
being a
rock,
pretty boy.
I'll calm down now.
this one's in Ayers, Australia, and it's kind of the same deal here. So this rock that you're looking at here, it's a former favorite climbing area. They have since stopped climbers from being in the area because they were doing so much damage to everything. It's an old pilgrimage and burial site of the local Aboriginals, of course. And it was opened as a national park area in the 1930s. So this place is very famous. The rock climbers still like to climb it, even though they're not supposed to be. But anyways, they take hundreds and hundreds of rocks from this place every year. And just like in Hawaii, the park rangers get boxes and boxes and boxes of them back with letters saying, please return these for me. This happened, and this happened. The tales are most often car issues with this rock. their cars will break down. They spend money on them, and then when they finally return the rocks, suddenly their vehicles are perfectly fine. But it also comes along with other things, money issues, health issues, blah, 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 blah. So I went and looked it up, the statistics on it. So the National Park Service receives around 350 packages of the rocks yearly. The interesting thing is that apparently most people can't just take one rock. They take multiples and they'll get entire boxes full of
Oh my
these
Oh,
rocks
gosh.
back.
geez.
I can't imagine what shipping is it's like with all of this weight, right?
You need to insure this. What is it? It's a rock. Yes, insure it. I needed to get there.
You know what's
Yeah.
strange about the rock itself? It kind of almost looks like a huge prehistoric beast lying on its side. I've got a good imagination.
Yeah, it
It's
does
more
kinda
like a
look like
It
that, doesn't
does.
it? Like a
Yeah.
tubby dinosaur or something.
Yeah. Exactly. Woolly mammoth. Looks like a woolly mammoth.
Yeah. So, the rocks almost always come with a sorry letter, an apology letter. Unfortunately, I guess, the park service can't actually return the rocks to the area because once they've been taken away, they don't know what's gotten on them, and they don't like to mess with, like, the eco of the area.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
they have an area that they dump those rocks. So,
So
these
they're
people
just
aren't even
basically
actually they aren't even
transferring.
actually returning them to the places where they took them.
They use them
Not
to
that they would
gravel
know.
walkway there at the office.
So they're like going to
Probably.
transfer the Uluru rock to another spot eventually
Yeah.
from all the little rocks
Uh,
coming off of it.
they did say so they do have one rock on display there, and it's actually the oldest rock that's been returned. Not the age of the rock itself, but how long ago it had been taken. It had been taken 40 years previously, and whoever
Wow.
had taken it had decided finally to return it.
That is crazy.
It
And
is
yeah,
very
Enzo
crazy.
Enzo said that whole mound sticks out like a sore thumb in that flat desert. It really does.
Yeah, it's really,
It's really odd.
really odd. Yeah.
Yeah. All
Oh,
right. So that's
oh,
about the end of our list. Oh,
hang on
what?
before you go on because Enzo had a really good point. I had forgotten. I
Okay.
was thinking we're back to Pele again. I was thinking they took a rock. They didn't. It was a tiki idol.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh.
yeah, and he said Vincent Price was the creepy doctor trying to get the tiki idol back from the Bradys. He was. And that's really strange when you think about them taking a tiki idol. It makes me think of the Catskills crone.
Oh
Don't
yeah.
take things away from where you find them because they're there for a reason. Okay,
Idols
that's
are
all I got.
just bad
I'm done.
business anyway.
Right?
So that is kind of the end. That's kind of where we were going to stop it at. I do want to say this because we have a little bit of time to play with here. So, on our route to coming up with the topics for this particular show, um, we had quite a few that we had to chuck because after about 2 minutes of research, we realized it was complete hokum.
Yeah.
We find that a lot. If we ever tell a story and we find out later on that it's not true, we will most certainly tell you that. And just to give you a little idea of what we deal with when we're researching here, I'm going to tell you one of the ones I actually fully researched it before I found out that it was absolutely false. So this one was called the Woman from Lim statue. And I have known about this thing since I was young. And I thought it was, oh, this horribly cursed object. And I so wanted it in this podcast because I was like, this is a really interesting one. It has some deaths involved with it and stuff. So I'm just going to tell this story to you. So the Woman from Lim statue, or the Goddess of Death statue, was dug up in Lim, Cyprus in 1878. It was a statue carved out of limestone, and it basically looked like your average, like a fertility goddess, just with a fat middle, just a little short fertility goddess statue. Um, they dated it back to 3500 BCE. Um, and It had belonged to 4 families in the course of its history from the time that they dug it up, um, all of which died an untimely fate. So it was originally owned by Lord Alphonse. All members of his family died within 6 years of him acquiring the stone. Ivor Minucci, he and his entire family died within 4 years of him receiving it. Lord Thompson Noel, his family all died within 4 years. And then it went missing for a number of years. And when it popped back up, it went to Sir Alan Biverbrook. He and his wife and 2 daughters died. But before it took his 2 sons, they took it and donated the statue to the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh, Scotland, where you can go and see it today. However, the statue took one more person when it arrived at the museum. The first person to handle it was the curator at the time, and he died the next day. So I've gone my whole life hearing this story and believing, wow, it absolutely is true. They have all the names, they have all the dates. Not one bit of it is true. If you go and look up any one of those days or the names or the dates, none of them are true. And in fact, when the statue itself is real, and you can go and see it at the Cyprus Museum. It was discovered in the 1970s, not back in the just back in the 1970s. It was found on a regular dig. They dug it up and they put it on display at the museum in Cyprus. There's no curse with it, and none of those people ever existed. Yeah,
There it is.
there's a picture of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the thing I spent a good couple of hours researching this and finding all the little details so that I could tell the story in its complete form. And one of my last stops was to check through the Cyprus Museum. Even though it was supposed to be in Edinburgh, I thought, well, the Cyprus Museum should have information on it too, and I can look directly through their files. And that's when I found the real files on it. And attached to it was a humorous story about this supposed curse that dated back to the 1800s. So,
Oh, whoops. Sorry, that was back to Pele again.
anywho, we ran into a lot of those. I was going to do a story on the Bassano vase. It's
Yeah.
completely false. And a good handful of other ones
That was
where
an
I was
interesting
calling
one,
Pam
yeah.
back and forth and saying, hey, we're not going to do this one. It's
Yeah.
not real. So always do your homework, people. Don't just take our word for it. And there may very well be one that we've told tonight that's false, but we just
We'll
haven't
Yeah, we
find
found
may
out
that
find more
information yet.
information out on it later. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
we
If
were
you find out
gonna
one is, let us know and we will put it up
Absolutely,
here.
yeah.
we were going to do a Fringe show. I can't even remember what it was the other day, and they started looking into it and
It
found
was
it was full of crap.
the 1988,
Yeah,
the
that's
World
it.
Reset or something like that in 1988.
So
And it ended up just being a couple of guys on either YouTube or TikTok, I can't remember, that were trying to start a rumor. And they
yeah,
were spreading it around, trying to get it going. And
it almost worked.
It got a little gumption behind it, so
any more sightings of the cardboard deer? No,
yes.
unfortunately.
Yes.
Oh, you're right. I'm thinking of the actual Mike's. No, Mike hasn't seen anything. But
Mike hasn't seen it, but other people have.
Yes, we have had someone else see it a few times
It's
in a
coming to
different
live
spot.
with you, Enzo.
Yeah,
Oh no.
that had no
He'll be
idea that
standing
Mike
in
had
your
seen it.
yard tomorrow. If he sees it tomorrow, I am going to.
Is it
I'm
going to
going
jump over his yard?
It
Is it going to be
might.
like boing?
Oh yeah, I want it. Yeah, boing.
Keep your eyes peeled, Enzo.
All
You never
right.
know.
So next time. So in 2 Wednesdays, we
March
are going to
13th.
do March 13th. Check us out because our next topic is going to be where we bury them. The haunts, mysteries, and cursed cemeteries and how to read the stones. So we're going to do like a little overall, and I'm sure this probably is going to be at least a two-parter, if not more.
Will it laugh maniacally when I press its paw? It
I mean,
might.
Get a hold of it.
we could probably arrange that.
I bet we could.
So our foray into cursed objects really led us into a lot of cemetery stuff, like the cursed Aggie. Oh my goodness, the amount of like haunted headstones and legends and stories that come along with these. You know, if you rub the knee 3 times, your grandma will die or something like that, you know. And witches' graves, the prevalence of witches'
Yes.
graves in nearly every cemetery. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how to read the stones. Interestingly, I learned about this when I was little because my family loves genealogy and they love cemeteries. I was taught how to read headstones, all the little objects and things that are included on them, engravings, carvings, even the little lambs that sit up on top of them sometimes, or the hands in which way they're pointed, can tell a story. So
Mhm.
we're also going to touch on that too. So you can kind of learn what it is you're looking at when you're looking at these headstones, because they say so much more than their epitaphs.
They do.
Some of
They
them are
really
super
do.
interesting. Yeah. So we're just going to spend some time talking about the haunts and the legends of cemeteries. It's going to be super fun and super haunted.
It
I might
should
have to
be a
put some like
good
headstones up in the
time.
back or something.
We used to have a whole bunch of them. I don't know if we still have any. I don't think I have any more. I know you
I have
do.
tons.
Yeah, you have
Yes, I
enough for all
do.
of us to use for sure. So we got a
Absolutely.
little bit left. Are we up for a round of notebooks?
Sure. I
Woohoo!
grabbed a pile. So,
Yay!
okay. I grabbed one. Yeah,
Jeez.
5.
And so
Oh,
I dream of genealogy.
I lo- I- People are going to say, that's a great special effect. That's not a special effect. That's how heavy those notebooks are.
that's how heavy they are. Okay, so for those of you who maybe have never seen this before or don't know what the notebook game is, as you can see on my little tag here, they call me notebooks because I keep all of my stuff old world style in these notebooks. And they are full of the most insane crap.
So when all the computers in the world crash, Jess will have our backs with her notebooks.
That's right. I'll still have all the information. Haha, suckers.
Someday, Jess's notebooks will be the subject of somebody's podcast in a museum or something.
Yeah, or they'll be the subject of my medical records because I'm in the loony bin. Anywho, how we play the game is if you want to get up in the chat rooms, I have 5 notebooks. So pick a notebook number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and pick a page number. Try to keep it below 50-ish, somewhere below there, because a lot of my notebooks are smaller and they don't go a whole lot past that. You can actually probably go up to 60, I would guess. 65-ish is probably safe. Okay, so what do we got here? Number 3, page 16. So let's see what's on that one. 1, 2, 3. 16. Give me just a second here.
Hmm.
This is so exciting. I love this part of the show.
I love this game.
All right. Ooh, okay. So this page is based on time slips that happened inside of Missouri. This one, oh, this is the good one. This is about the girl in Hannibal, Missouri, who back in 1951 went missing from her home for 3 days. She just
Yeah.
disappeared in front of her sister, and when she they were out looking for her, and she just popped in front of her dad, just popped out of nothing, and died 4 days
Almost
later
immediate.
of the
Yeah.
plague. She described to her family that when she disappeared out of her yard, she stumbled into a place that had stone roads and it smelled really bad. And there was mean people and horses, she said. And the people were wearing funny clothing and nobody would help her. They wouldn't give her food or anything like that. And she just kind of existed on these streets. And then suddenly she was back in her own yard. but she's the only person in the state of Missouri to die of the plague.
That is
Something
a
in the
freaky one.
1950s that was not around.
Yeah, that
So-
is crazy.
That is
Yeah.
freaking.
Yeah, that's what this page is about. So
Ooh.
who's next? We got Chris. Chris wants to do number 3, page 25.
Enzo said, oof, when time traveling, always use hand sanitizer.
I don't think they had hand sanitizer back in the 50s.
You'll just have to carry some in your pocket. Carry the full COVID kit with you.
He also said, in the future, Jess, your notebooks are going to be referred to as Exhibit A, B, C, and D.
Nice.
No, it'll probably be going
Okay.
A, B, B, C, C, D, D.
Okay. So this page is on 2 things. So the first thing is on the suicide forest in Rock Springs, Caddo County, Oklahoma, which we actually did a little bit on one of the guys' shows.
Mhm.
This is a crazy place. So the suicide forest, it's not like the parallel forest that we talked about. This is a place, back in the 1800s, it was Caddo Indian burial site area. And apparently over the years, Indians from that tribe have walked into this area and hung themselves in the trees, and it's become quite haunted. I've never been able to find a whole lot of history on that area, so I can't say for certain that that is true, but that's the legend around it. This place also has a hat man in the trees. That I have found lots of stories on. The second story on this page is the mystery gas story from Roger Mills County, Oklahoma. It happened in
Mark.
63. This really weird gas blanketed this rural area. It caused illness and nausea, coughing, diarrhea, skin burns. It cracked and crumbled some of the houses that it surrounded.
Wow.
It blistered the paint. It darkened silver in the houses. It caused clothing to disintegrate. It killed livestock, birds, and insects in the area.
I mean, it's sounding
Sorry.
more and more like I was in town.
Damn, Mark, you blistered the. Sorry.
Oh my goodness. All right. Anybody else? Or
Yes, we have a couple more. And before
Okay.
hopefully he's still here, Sylvain said it was cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. We're so glad you
Yeah.
did. That's awesome. Okay, next one is book 5, page 49.
49. All right. I'm going to have to skip back through things here.
For those that don't know, Chris is Mark's wife.
Or as I'm known in the superhero community, the flatulator.
All right.
The flatulator. Oh my gosh. That's
So
hilarious.
this page is on the Spanish conquistador sightings in 1978, 1983, 1984, 1989, 1996, 2005, and 2015 in Oklahoma, basically around the Canute area and the Tulsa area. I have side notes here for a different page in a different notebook. After I found this, we were actually doing a story on the guys' page. We were doing like a Ripley's Believe It or Not, little short
Yeah.
stories that weren't big enough to do our like one whole show on. So we just threw them all into like a mixed bag show. And in the process of looking at something else, I actually found a story where they had found Spanish gold mines in Oklahoma. And it was around this area where all of these Spanish conquistadors had been popping up kind of like time slippy, like they would just like pop into people's living rooms, or
It's
you'd
pretty
see them out in
fascinating.
your driveway in full regalia, just as solid as can be. And found out that the Cascarillo gold mines, Spanish gold mines, were right near Canute, Oklahoma.
Enzo asked if there's any pattern on those dates.
Not really. The issue with trying to find a pattern in those dates is that these are just the people who were willing to say something about it publicly
Mhm.
enough that it got dated and stored somewhere. I can't imagine how many were seen and not reported.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good
not one to
point.
be the no, there's that crazy guy who saw
Yeah.
us.
All right. So what do we got here? Number 2, page 28.
Yes.
Okay. 1, 2. Dig.
Number 2, page 28.
All
Oh,
right.
Rick picked the last one. He said it sounded like he picked a good one. You did. The conquistadors in Oklahoma are fascinating.
All right. Ooh, this one is on the vile vortices.
Ooh,
Oh,
that's a
yay.
good one.
That was a good one.
Yeah. So, okay. For those who are listening who may not know what it is, the vile vortices are a collection of basically Bermuda triangles that happen all over the world in a pattern.
Mhm.
You can actually get up and see them. They kind of line up, and they call them the vile vortices. They're the collection of the worst ones. Some of those triangles are they don't do anything. They're not bad places, or maybe they're areas where nobody lives. There's no land. It's just open ocean, and not a lot of traffic happens there. So we don't know if they're active or not. Um, but this is just kind of a listing of them and what happens within them. The most famous, the Bermuda, the South Atlantic anomaly near the coast of Brazil, Tropic of Cancer, Bermuda Triangle, the Pajarodero, the Devil's Sea or the Dragon's Triangle, the one near Hawaii, the Kalia, the megalithic ruins of Algeria, the South Atlantic anomaly, the megaliths of Zimbabwe, the Wharton Basin, the Hebrides Trench, and the Easter Islands are all
Interesting.
vortices there. We'll probably do a show on them at some point here.
That'd be a
Um,
good one.
yeah, but they're called the vile vortices because the activity with them are just insane.
I believe we may have done that on the Friends show. Or
We
maybe
may have.
earlier when it was
Or-
still off.
Yeah, while it was still just What If Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Craig and Ashley said the most impressive thing about the notebooks is how Jess has written them on her mind. One of a kind. Absolutely. I'm impressed with the notebooks and Jess. Those are just, it's crazy what she's got in there and what she can retain.
Well, I think I can retain it. I actually had this conversation. I was chit-chatting with Enzo one night, and I don't like typing them out. I don't seem to retain the information as well if I sit there and type out my notes, but if I write them,
They stick. Maybe
it
that's what
sticks
I need to
better.
do.
I don't know. Book
Everything
1,
flies
page
out of my mind.
10. Let's see here. Oh, so this is Sally House history.
Oh, nice.
This is the history on the Sally House. So I had to turn it back one page to see what it was I was in the middle of because it's continued from a different page. So this is the page of the odd information that we found while we were researching the origins of the house. So the reason why we have it in the first place, we actually got an opportunity to investigate there. We stayed overnight and did a full investigation, just our little investigative group, BorderTown Paranormal. And we like to do full histories on these places so we can kind of get a general idea of what it is we're walking into. It also helps out when you're doing EVPs and when you're talking back and forth the rods. If you have some names that can be recognized, it can really help out. Anywho, this is just some of the weird information we found. So we found out that the back of the house used to be the front of the house. The river flooded out that part of Atchison, Kansas, and it took out an entire street apparently. And so what they ended up doing was they ended up making the back end of the house the front end of the house, and the road there was now the road to their
Street
home,
entrance.
right? Um, a pentagram and demonic names were found by the owner, Lee Smith, a current tenant at the time who was accused of dark magic, had trashed the house and left the names and pentagram on the basement floor and walls. A local teacher and volleyball coach stayed there rent-free for a while. He began acting strange. He skipped town, taking the money belonging to the volleyball team, and disappeared, and has never been heard from since, which is absolutely true. I've checked back in on that. He's never shown
That
back up.
Yeah, that is really
Yeah.
strange.
The Pickmans, who were the original ones who had issues with the Sally House story is wrapped around, they still live in Atchison, about, I think it's 8 blocks away from
Something
that
like that,
original
yeah.
house. They still to this day are having issues with that house, and I have kind of a listing here of some of the things that when happened. The biggest one is that the husband, he was the one that was getting scratched a lot by the supposed Sally. He started having issues with sleepwalking. And one winter night, he went to bed, and when he woke up, he was standing in front of the Sally house in his pajamas with no socks on in the snow. He had walked in his sleep from his home to the front door of the Sally house.
Absolutely terrifying too. It was freaky.
That would scare the P-Wad out of
Yeah,
me.
absolutely.
The other little 2 things I have here is after luminol tests, they found blood splatter in the master bedroom closet, and they found a bloody sweater in the attic in 2012.
Whoa is right.
That is what's on that page.
That is freaky.
Yeah. So are we good, or is there
I
anything
think we're
else?
good,
That
yeah.
was it. And we are almost right on the dot, 9 o'clock. So
Woohoo!
what a great show. We just want
Yay,
to
was
I
say
had a good
fun.
time.
it was a great one. And thank you everybody for coming and hanging out with us and engaging in the chats. We love it.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
That's the best part of the live streams.
It is
So are
for
we
sure.
ready? Are we ready to close out? Are
We
we
are
good?
ready to close out. Yeah.
All right. So thanks everybody for hanging out with us in the chats and all. Thank you to Mark for coming and joining us again. We kind of
Anytime.
like use him up like that.
Yes, we
Remember
appreciate
to,
you.
yeah. Yay, Mark. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and find us on our social medias. You can find a listing of our show notes, resources, and references on our website, www.bordertownparanormal.com. Under the BorderTown Strange button, you'll find it at the top. Catch the show live every other Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central. Join us in 2 weeks for an all-new episode where we bury them about the cemeteries. Keep it strange, and remember, it's all connected. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.